Well, Gary, welcome to the Full-Time Hustler podcast. This podcast, what I like to do is they say that 1 in 10 startups will make it. And so I like to get in here firsthand from the kind of demystify entrepreneurship, if you will, and hear firsthand from the entrepreneurs that are working on the front lines like yourself. So with that being said, I'll turn it to you, Gary, and tell me who you are. You're the past, present, future, good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, Jason. So I'm Gary. We're working on Gauss, tech startup, which I'm sure we can get more into in a bit. I'm a Marine veteran. Started my first business, actually incorporated my first business in the mid-90s at the age of 12. Ran 20 years profitably. After the Marine Corps, started a number of other businesses. I've worked in the event and entertainment industry over the last decade. What are some more interesting things that I haven't talked too much about publicly yet? I ran a koi farm at 15 and 16.
Really?
The age of 15 and 16, yep. It's an interesting thing. At the age of 17, I ran a junkyard in upstate New York. Done all sorts of stuff through my life. I don't know. I don't believe there's a straight path for everyone, and that has certainly not been my life.
Well, some of the ups and downs, I'm sure there's some within Koi Farm. Lord, I felt like there was a whole podcast in that. That's got, the ups and downs, but I'm sure in your journey, you started an adventure before, the ups and downs has got you to where you're at right now.
So it's interesting. I think the grass is always greener, right? That adage is true no matter what you're in. I've been a helicopter mechanic. I've been an industrial mechanic. I've done all sorts of construction, everything you can think of with construction, everything it takes to build up or tear down a house. So everything has ups and downs, right? It's all a matter of perspective, I think, and how you deal with those ups and downs day to day. Certainly much of my life I've been through plenty of challenges, trials and tribulations, if you will, but it just is what it is. I think everyone has them, and they're all different. If you go order a sub from Subway, or you're in a checkout line at Target, the person that you're interacting with likely has their own ups and downs, and I don't think they're vastly different from most other people's. The human experience is really interesting, and that our hardships, we feel like they're incredibly unique, and in some ways they are. But we all have them, right?
Precisely. You say you was a Marine, and as a Marine, I ask you just as a little plug, what did you do?
Yeah, I was a 6113 helicopter mechanic for CH-53 Deltas. I was stationed
overworked and underpaid.
Yeah, that's the entirety of the Marine Corps.
Well, I know my friends in the Air Wing that the green weenie definitely gets you, and you work about 32-hour days.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I was the only one. So after I left Flightline, because I went in as a helicopter mechanic, and I went into maintenance material control to be an expediter, and worked in there for most of the rest of the time in the Corps. But I was the only one doing my job for a long time. So I worked day crew and night crew. High five myself.
Yes.
While everyone else was coming and going.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, how did you go from the Marine Corps to entrepreneurship?
Well, I think it's the other way around. I think I went from entrepreneurship to the Marine Corps. Again, I started the landscaping company in the mid-90s. Before that, even as a child, I just went over this in an interview for a magazine that really thinking back, like perhaps one of my earliest, my lemonade stand story, right? Examples of entrepreneurship were these Easter egg hunts I did in like first, second, and third grade, where I charged all the neighborhood kids to come to an Easter egg hunt at my house that I put on, and I would hide change in eggs and under shells and all sorts of stuff like that. And I made a killing for a kid at it. And then when Jurassic Park came out, I started a dinosaur kids club, just a group of neighborhood kids where I pulled everyone's money so we could buy more cool shit, as a group, because I wasn't, I didn't grow up with means or anything like that. So how do you stretch your lunch money? Pull it with a bunch of other kids and buy some Michael Crichton books and stickers and dinosaur toys. So that's like an early membership thing that I did, I guess. So then I went to the Marine Corps because, I couldn't afford college. I applied to 2 colleges, got accepted, found out how wildly expensive that was, and needed to do something with my life after high school because I turned 17 my senior year. So after high school, I went and traveled a bit up to family up in New England. My mother was living in upstate New York. When I went and stayed with her, I think that was 7 months I was in upstate New York. I delivered newspapers up there, ran a junkyard, did a handful of things at that point, went back to Florida. It was like, I need to figure something out with my life. And some recruiters called. And so I went and talked to all the recruiters. They all offered me bonuses, except for the Marine Corps. And I chose Marine Corps, because it was the greatest challenge. We have the greatest uniform. That's why, the money from the other branches was appealing, some of those bonuses, but the challenge, I think is what really attracted me to the Marine Corps. It's also what kept me in the event and entertainment industry, because, many events are the same, but your challenges are always different. You're like as a director of a music festival or operations director, any of the positions at that level and up to that level, you're very much a firefighter. You're looking to see smoke in the distance. If a fire pops up, you put it out. Hopefully, though, you foresee them before it ever becomes smoke in the distance. It's just different challenges. That's the answer to your question. It's what's attracted me to entrepreneurship is the challenges. What attracted me to the Marine Corps.
Love it. So I guess the heart of this, we'll get right into it. So tell me what you're working on now. And the way I usually like to hear pitches or frame them is kind of this outline. It's a problem. What is the problem statement? The solution, what is it that, how are you solving that problem? The model that you're bringing, to it, that, how are you, the business model behind solving that problem? Go-to-market strategy, you don't have to give too many details since this will be public. What are the plans to reach the audience that have that problem? Any financial data that you have, if you've had success or, what are you planning? And then the management team. So again, the overarching question, that's kind of the outline, but it's what are you working on now? And viewers, anybody listening, this is where I would really start listening.
Yeah. So we're working on Gauss, as I said. It's a curated layer 1 blockchain. What that means is it's a permissioned ecosystem where we vet every project and brand that launches with us. I believe a huge problem in this space, much like early e-commerce, the early internet, is there's a ton of, fraud, scams, brand infringement. It's just not a safe space for a lot of traditional business to begin moving into. And then I think they see that, they know that, and there's a lot of pilots going on, but much of what the public sees is, and says about the crypto space is justified, I believe. There's billions upon billions lost to scams because there's a high technical understanding needed, to really get into it. And even just for your end user who wants to swap 2 digital assets, it's a multi-step process. It's very convoluted. So that's another big goal of ours is to demystify the space and to a large degree, stop saying NFTs and Web3 and, all these buzzwords that people are using for, news articles or fundraising because the end consumer doesn't care. They don't care that it's, Web3. The brand doesn't care. If Target moved their reward and loyalties program to our ecosystem, their end users don't care. They just want it to work in the app. Just like most end users don't care that we just move from IPv4 to IPv6 with the internet. Most end users have no idea what TCP/IP is. They just use the internet. They just want it to work. So that's initially what we are solving for, and what we're building to significantly down the road, 5, 10, and 20 years from now, is where I believe we'll be. You know, the metaverse is a buzz topic these days, but I think that's an inevitability in the form of media. You know, games have overtaken every other form of entertainment marketing or entertainment sectors that we have. Sports, Hollywood, music, all of those things. And I think, you know, in 10 years, and realistically, we're 5, 10 years away from the actual metaverse. You know, we're seeing the Pong era of that right now. 5, 10 years from now, I think we'll start seeing the start of real networked virtual environments that have immersive experiences and interoperable assets and things like that. So that's part of what we're building toward. Yeah, that's what we're building. That's the foundation of it, right? Because it's such a huge topic. Our foundation is as a platform and technological layer to be built upon. You know, our go-to-market strategy. You asked that one. As I said, I've been in the event and entertainment industry for just over a decade before pandemic, because that shut everything down. And so we're leaning into our existing warm leads. For me and some of the other core team members, that's the music, movie industry. Those are also brands that are significantly easier to ink deals with and bring on board. You have an agent and a management team and the brand themselves, not numerous teams that have to buy into the decision, you know, with Pepsi or Target or Nike or Starbucks. Those are significantly lengthier processes. So that's part of our go-to-market strategy without getting too deep into the specifics, because, you know, this is a tech startup, a business, as we were talking about previously. This is, you know, wanting to do business right, which I think this space is also sorely lacking, right? A lot of our team, both from the co-founders and everyone else we brought on board, has a significant amount of transferable skills, which is also important in this space, because I don't believe there are many crypto experts. It's a new technology still. That would be like saying you were an internet expert in the 70s. You know, sure, you worked with ARPANET and you were one of the early builders of it. And then everyone else that comes into this nascent technology, you know, you're not experts. You're new in this fledgling thing. I mined Bitcoin back in 2009 and gave it away because I thought it was worthless, and at the time it was worthless. I wouldn't say that I've been in the blockchain space for 13 years. You know, I had a Coinbase wallet back in 2014. I worked with a charity in 2011 and 12 and 13 and 14, I think. It was 4 years with them on and off. They received most of their donations from Bitcoin that saw value increase. Again, I wouldn't say I've been in the blockchain industry that long. I haven't been building in it. So that's a long, meandering path.
Oh, it's perfect. So it's a platform that now, and I guess my question will be is tell me the use cases for this e-commerce, or not, excuse me, this platform that will, and I'm going to try to be layman here and correct me where I'm wrong. It will bring a lot of clarity to this otherwise convoluted space.
Yeah. So the use cases are legion, whatever anyone can dream up, right? We're going to offer up a number of menu options, as it were, to brands to help onboard them into the space. You know, that can look like reward and loyalty programs, building circular economies with their own branded tokens, meaning that they take a Pepsi coin distribute it as a reward to their holders, who then use it for whatever Pepsi merch or Pepsi discounts or what have you. So they're bringing that token back in, and then they can then redistribute it. And if their users, they receive those rewards, want to sell it instead, more's the better, in my opinion, for that brand. It means you slightly missed your target when issuing those rewards. So in them selling it, the end result would be the buyer on the other side being somebody you would have wanted to target, right? The use cases, it is a difficult topic insofar as, like, when electricity was invented, nobody had conceived of electric cars or electric guitars. Phenomenal use cases for electricity, way out in left field, and never would have been dreamt up when that technology was being developed. I do think, though, for brands specifically, there's going to be a myriad of potential use cases that we can explore with them. For artists and whatnot, they can do the NFTs and royalty system. Those are really intriguing. I think we're only just now starting to really explore what that looks like, because you can programmatically handle, revenue splits and things like that. So you can hand out a chunk to songwriters and everyone else in that chain. So I think that's an intriguing aspect for, labels themselves and management companies. I think one of the bigger things to explore, again, in 5 and 10 years, once we get to more immersive media, will be engaging with their communities, because I think that's really where it's going. I think the marketing of today is going to look very different down the road. Right now, you have spray and pray, shotgun method marketing. You hope for a large, maybe single-digit percentage in your conversions, which then maybe have another single-digit percentage, or click-throughs and conversions. And I think that is just remarkably inefficient for a $1 trillion market. Global advertising is a huge industry that's so mistargeted, and all that money ends up going back to these platforms, which is something we really want to disrupt as well. I'm really looking forward to capturing even just a chunk of that market and distributing those funds to end users. That's what rewards programs look like, right? So if we had 200 billion rather, of that global advertising market go straight to end users, that's redistribution of wealth. That's decentralization of revenue.
So this is a decentralized ecosystem for rewards and recognition that is really demystifying that space, the rewards and recognition for brands.
Well, it's actually, so the underlying technology is centralized, right? Like in the traditional sense, because right now I think people's understanding of the terms, even just decentralization, is very amorphous.
Good point.
It's not remarkably well defined. How can you call a decentralized blockchain decentralized if you're selling nodes for $50 or $60 or $200,000? That's not decentralization. You're still concentrating that control, power, and wealth in a small number of hands. Yes, we're centralized in that we curate the ecosystem. We want to keep bad actors out. We want to keep fraud out. But our whole business model is transaction fees. That's going to be the largest chunk of our business model. Unlike Apple, Google, Steam, you name it, we don't want 30% though of what passes through our ecosystem, what's built on the ecosystem. At start, we're probably going to have about 5-ish%. And as volume increases, that number will continue to diminish. In 5 or 10 years, it'll likely be a very small percentage, lower than 2.5% ideally, potentially less than 1%. We'll have to see where things go for that, but that's the idea, right? I don't want us, Gauss, to be the large middleman saying, yep, you're launching in our Play Store, as it were. we're taking 30%, or you're launching a game with us, because gaming is a huge sector that we're looking to tackle, especially early on, because they have long development cycles. We have a whole grant program that we're launching for that, but we're not going to be Steam. We're not going to take that 30%. I think that's a take rate that will begin dying off, because those brands just have too large, their budgets are way too large. They can't evolve to be as nimble as we'll be building to be. Facebook couldn't say we're only going to take 2% tomorrow, nor could Apple or any of the other FANG companies. So
how would a small brand, what would the onboarding look like?
Yeah, so we have multiple different pipelines to launching with us. For large brands, it looks more like a sales team and account executive process. For small brands, though, we have an application process that we're developing right now with a curation team that's very manual. It is not at this juncture scalable. We need to make sure that what we're building works as a process before really scaling it. So they apply. We first go through an internal review process. If they make it through that step, that very first step of our team, 3 people on that curation team, using our scoring rubric and saying yes, yes, no. Maybe there's some remediation in there. Maybe there's something else we need to review. But if they make it through that, then they go on to the next step, which is third-party KYB, which is know your business, not know your client or customer. That's a third-party review where they go through and check out their, actual physical identification, or digital copies, as it were, of their physical identification, and everything else. What is their business structure? Are they incorporated? Doing actual recorded video interviews. There's a lot that goes into that step. After that, they go through tokenomics review. If they've already developed tokenomics, we review this at that step to say, yes, okay, you have a sustainable method that you want to launch with, or, oh my God, this is hyperinflationary rebase project number 4002. That's not going to work for us. There's not utility there. You're just trying to create some hype crap Ponzi scheme that we don't want. After that, there's a legal review that actually goes and digs a bit further into their legal structuring and things like that, checking to make sure that if they already have brought on shareholders, that they're capable of launching with us, right? After that step, we go through a final internal review, and then we can announce that they're approved to being launched. So it's definitely a multi-step, very manual process at the beginning. Down the road, we're looking at potentially having, in a couple of years, 10,000 projects, 100 projects a day applying. So it's going to be bandwidth that we have to work on scaling up to. But
that onboarding, and correct me if I'm wrong, sounds very identical or similar, if not identical, to marketplaces.
Yeah, similar. It's also similar to what you see in some of the better accelerators and incubators.
Absolutely.
Which, is something else. Yeah. That's another area we're looking at. And something else we get to do as a curated layer 1 blockchain, a curated ecosystem, is take that quality over quantity and then really set them up for success. Let's say most projects in this space are projects, not businesses, to start out. And that's not a terrible thing, but they do need to have a bit more structure into them. They need legal support and marketing support and organizational, operational support. They need to be built out as businesses to really succeed. And that's stuff we're looking at helping them, set up. And
that's what I'm spitballing here, and shoot me down, because I'm genuinely spitballing. It sounds like there's an opportunity, and as you say, with the incubator and accelerator onboarding process you have, that there is a opportunity for a marketplace for your for the clients that you take on board and pass this, there's some kind of value add that say, there's a marketplace that another user could come and say, hey, given that they went through your onboarding, that is a stamp for something. And here, like, again, I don't know what the marketplace, I don't know what the pitch would be. But it seems like a value to like congregate in a centralized marketplace of your clients.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, for the end user, I think it's important. We haven't touched on this yet, but I think it's important for end users to maintain custody of their own assets, a la FTX. But, let's say game A wants to launch with us and they want to have their own NFT marketplace and their own, token swap. Hell, we could build out a layer 2 ecosystem for individual games that need that level of transactional bandwidth. But if they wanted to have all of that, they can. And the users, if they wanted to take their own assets from that in-game or in-app wallet into a larger ecosystem, they can do that. They can then swap it in our swap and do things like that. And I do think you hit the nail on the head that there is the value add as well to being a curated ecosystem or to launching with one. Given the degree that we're going to be vetting these projects, it's much like, VC firms look to accelerators, some of the larger, more notable ones, without needing to do tons of due diligence for that reason. They're like, well, they went through this.
Y Combinator, for example.
Yeah, I wasn't going to name any of them, but YC is definitely one. We actually got asked to apply to YC for Winter 23 back in August, and we believe that it was not the right time for us because we were, if you're pre-launch, YC is great. If you're in the idea phase, YC is great. I think they have a phenomenal team. I'm a big fan of Michael Siebel, Gary Tan, a ton of people that have been through and worked on YC. But it's not right for us at this juncture. It was a really hard decision because going through YC is exactly that. It's that stamp of approval. You get a valuation multiplier during your equity round just for having that, being YC alum. You also get the massive network of founders and everything else. But for us, we wanted to get, our blockchain to launch, our swap and everything else we're building to launch, our ecosystem starting, before we really focused on anything else. We're currently raising funds. We've bootstrapped up to this point. We've had NFT sales, which as a layer 1 is different. But I think it's an interesting way of starting to build a community to prove out your concept. Our first 2 months, we did 300,000 in sales without leaning on influencer marketing, because I'm not a huge fan of that, of just paying people to shill for you. That's not we're definitely taking all the harder paths here.
It sounds like it.
But I think it's the right path, right? I think being aggressively different will prove out in the end.
If I were only about your token sale.
So our native coin is called Gang, and there's a longer story that I can tell you about in probably 6 or 12 months behind why it's Gauss Gang. Gauss, by the way, is named after Carl Friedrich Gauss. And we're all nerds on the team. So it was an interesting conversation when we were first coming up with the name and everything, and talked about that. And I was like, no, we're going to pronounce it Gauss, just because I've always mispronounced it my whole life, from sci-fi, punk, gaming, Gauss cannon, Gauss rifle. But it's actually Gauss, is how you would pronounce, Gaussian distribution, things like that. Anyway, so our native coin is Gang, and we're distributing that publicly via NFT, which are called Pharaoh cards. And they're kind of like membership passes, magnets for rewards, and keys to exclusive opportunities, because it gives us a way to showcase some of the use cases with, tokenized assets, how you can market with them, how you can build communities, how you can reward them. and they'll also have a gang allocation to them. There's 4 tiers of those. The first 3 are mostly public sale. The last one is targeting more the institutional buyer, more akin to a traditional token sale. Those are 25 grand a piece, with a limit of 4. However, there's only 100 available. The limit, to me, I don't want to sell $1 million worth of our token out the gate to one buyer, firm or whatnot, because they could have an outsized impact on our ecosystem in 2 years, right? I think it's more important to protect the ecosystem and, again, take the harder route. Raise smaller amounts for more people as we get started. So that's, functionally where the token sale, the brief information. I could go into all the depths of each of those tiers, which are iron, nickel, cobalt, and chromium, and ferro being ferromagnetic cards. This whole, magnetism Gauss theme.
Well, I'll say that first off, as a computer science and all-arching science fan, I have the fundamental belief that mathematics is the language of sciences, and I go as far as to say that, this is really off the rails here, but if there is another intelligent life out in this cosmos, which, given the size, is probable, though we haven't found it, I believe the language that it will speak to us in is mathematics. So to Carl Friedrich, I will say that commend your nerdiness, and also as someone with my accent that is not known for enunciation, I'll say that Gauss, I like the double play on it in the way that you've called it, the way you say it.
Yeah.
So, hats off to using a mathematician. And 2, I like enunciation, that my accent and those like me, which I will summarize as those who speak in cursive. That's how I summarize that's how I say, when people say, when people comment on my accent, I say I speak in cursive, because, it's like, I'll give you an example. We condense things, it's just like cursive, so that you don't have to pick up the pencil or your writing utensil. It's like, mayonnaise I say is a redneck word. And they're like, what? Mayonnaise, a lot of people in here, which is, man, there's a lot of people. Or one of my favorite growing up was Jeet Yet, which means did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we condense it down to Jeet. So I like the Gauss, which I don't know how I would say that when I first looked at it. Now that I've heard you say it, and I've heard others reference it before, but I think the GA would get me in my accent. I'd fall for that GA trap.
Yep.
I would really enunciate the guy, not, I wouldn't overlook it.
Well, it's funny. We just had the animated video that's on our YouTube channel that we had, which is just like a 3-minute, not explaining everything, just touching on some of the points about brands and advertising and that stuff. Anyway, the first voiceover actor that we had do that, I wanted British. He kept saying Gus. So it was, and so impactfully, the power of Gus.
Well, that's the thing about, my neighbor is British, and in fact, I don't think him and I have sat during COVID and we sit at the fence and solved the world's problems. He's a psychologist by background. Though I will pull out and say, I don't think when him and I have talked to each other, either one of us know what the other one is saying, because you should hear an English person, not just British, but English, he's from England, and he reminds me of my American naivety in that, or naiveness in that, I say Great Britain, I'm like, you're British. He's like, saying you're British, calling me British, is like calling you North American. I'm like, oh, I get it. He's like, I'm from England. I'm like, I'm English. And what I real point out about him and those with his accent is they enunciate it perfectly. They enunciate everything that should be enunciated. And I guess you could, it sounds kind of mood or rhetorical at this point, but it's English, and they are kind of the Arthurs. So it's like, who am I to argue? However, I don't try to argue. I'll just say that that's how I say it. It's my accent. I'm not trying to, just, if you understood me, good.
Well, it's funny, the Southern accent, I just Googled this. I Google everything all the time, always. But I wanted to make sure it wasn't fully apocryphal. It might still be. I'm not deep diving into this. But I remembered hearing that the Southern accent is actually closer to the original British accent. And theirs
I
has
almost
evolved
believe
to.
that too, because think about where we first colonized. See,
Well, I
that's
mean,
them. It was British and English. It was where would it come from? I mean, it was us.
right. Well, I mean, things evolve over time. Like, and you have tons of other accents, like, French Creole
Well,
or.
I was about to bring up, if you ever watch Swamp People, or see, that's a different, in that bayou area down there in the swamps. I'm from the Appalachian foothills.
Right.
NASCAR, left turning, moonshine, bootlegging, all that good stuff. Which, by the way, the reason we only turn left is because if you have enough moonshine bootlegging, you can only turn one direction. Side story on that: my grandfather, when I was doing driver's ed in high school, he took me, and I was driving him around, and he was a bootlegger. He's recently passed, but again, moonshine in my family, you always reach one arm and touch it. A gallon jar with clear, looks like water, but it's not. Unfortunately, I don't drink, so it's like even though I have the best, like you could say, the best unaged corn whiskey right around me. Nonetheless, we were in driver's ed, and I was driving him around, and he took me to this house. I mean, we're pulling up. It looked like this house had its own zip code. It was a beautiful estate. And out came Junior Johnson, and Junior Johnson is one of the founders of NASCAR, one of the originals of NASCAR. And him and my grandfather got to shooting the shit and like talking like old buddies. But it really reminds me that and I wasn't a NASCAR fan growing up. I am now. Now that I've gotten away from my roots, it's like, wait, I can and remember who I am, so to speak. Again, NASCAR is more important now that I'm older than it was when I was younger. But it was just that they say that it was founded on the bootleggers and moonshiners. And then I've got that memory of my grandfather, who is one, pulling up, meeting Junior Johnson, and they were again talking like he was introducing me to Junior. And in fact, to this day, I still keep Junior Johnson's He has a moonshine brand. Of course, he's passed too, but I keep I keep in stock for gifts and for others his brand of moonshine. I keep every flavor, from apple pie to regular to all the ones they sell. I think it's called Midnight Moon is the brand. Anybody wants to go to the ABC store. Anyway, but our accent in the foothills, well, it's mine. And then you go to the swamp, that area, down there in the bayou, they sound like, when you listen to Troy Landry from Swamp People, it's a completely different. His sounds like mine, but with a dip in. I can't. That's all I can say. It's a terrible description. However, it's what I hear when I hear Louisiana and Mississippi people talk. So yes, it's Southern, but you have a lot more French in yours, and you can hear the French in it, because theirs sounds like double cursive.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you just can't understand it all. Like the real deep swamp people, that is like, it gets thick.
That is true. That is very
Language
true.
and dialects have always interested me. I mean, I say that, and there's 400,000 other topics that have also interested me. 'Cause I'm that guy.
Likewise. So let me ask you back to your venture here with Gauss, and however else anyone else wants to pronounce it. Your ecosystem, named after probably one of the greatest mathematicians ever. I'll cite it that way for anyone listening to clear that up. This is a generic question, but I want to hear taking from Hollywood and drama and acting. I want to hear the emotion in this question, and that's really what I'm digging for. It kind of kills it now that I've prefaced it that way, but also kind of gives you the lead. But what excites you the most about what you're working on, and like what potential do you see?
So it's a really interesting question. I actually haven't been asked this one. I don't think. when I was younger, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I think every kid wanted to be a fighter pilot or a firefighter or whatever. Every kid of the elder millennial era, not
Zennial.
necessarily.
Zennial.
You
I'm
know,
one myself.
yeah, many of us, that was our thing. And then I grew up as a nerd, a nerd doing lots of manual labor, but I play role-playing games and read tons of sci-fi stuff. We were just talking last night, me and one of our other team members, about Philip K. Dick, and Asimov came up today. You have Snow Crash, which is where the term metaverse actually originated. But it's always been such an area of interest for me, to imagine where the world is in 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 and 50. What does the world of tomorrow look like? Right. And some people have gotten kind of close when they've guessed about it in the past, and others have been wildly inaccurately wrong. Like Star Trek. Look at Star Trek. Phenomenal entertainment content right there. But, which I'm a big Star Trek fan. So, but the original Star Trek and TNG, Next Generation, that's part of why we have cell phones today. A Star Trek nerd grew up and wanted to see this exist, and never thought it would actually make it. The inventor of, the flip phone, the original cell phone and all that, he never thought it was going to work, that people would just want this in their pocket all the time. And he spoke plenty about it. He's like, I'm building it because I think it's cool. I don't think anyone wants it. And here we are. It's part of our, we're cyborgs with this thing. It's an extension of us. I use it to Google things constantly. It's expanded my access to information and daily knowledge constantly. And this area of technology that we're building in, the reason it's so exciting to me is for what it can be in the future, right? In that 10, 20-year time frame, the broad spectrum immersive media, movies will still exist, books will still exist, games will still exist. Not everything will be in this new format, but the things that are in this format, I think, will be phenomenal. And so that's what excites me about it, and why I'm excited to build toward that, even at this early stage, this early ARPANET equivalent era before TCP/IP in this space. It's just looking at what that future could be. And as a caveat to this, I think it's interesting because I have a good friend of mine, who loves me to death. I love him to death, fully support everything he does, and vice versa. But if the world comes to pass the way I'd like to see it happen, he doesn't want to live in that world. And I think that's interesting as well about the, human existence and our perspectives on things, that what one person sees as utopian, another person's going to see fully as dystopian. What's beautiful to one is utterly horrific to another. And I think that's interesting. I don't think there's necessarily anything good or bad in it. Somebody will get the most blissful existence living, the Swiss Family Robinson cabin in the woods lifestyle. And I can even see the appeal in that. And others want to see an ultra futuristic, sci-fi, we have a fully immersive metaverse. We have cybernet, the whole nine, like post-singularity thing. Another might see that they want a post-scarcity egalitarian utopia. Again, a la Star Trek, right? That's what excites me about this. Building what I see as being part of that future, like an actual foundational pillar of what that could be.
Wow. I first off, let me say that that is the exact answer I was looking for. And when you say sci-fi and, growing up and I know I've heard even boomers refer to the Jetsons in the analogy you gave with Star Trek. It's like they see things that were on there that were, in its time prefaced as futuristic, and yet they have came to pass. And so many examples from that show, and Star Trek, because this sci-fi community, a lot of your engineers and your technologists are, they grew up just like you and I both with watching those, and now they're the ones shaping it.
Yep.
And I'll give you a little personal. I'm the same in regards to as your use case here in your ecosystem with cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. I am the hyper focused myself with AI and like crypto. I believe it's got a lot of buzzwords currently, and about 98% of it isn't. What I am trying to do, what I like to define is, my nerdishness and where I go, down 1,000 rabbit holes. And I'll just I'll summarize that as, I'm not necessarily in current terms, we have dumb AI. I'll give an example. Like Siri is not exactly what I'm trying to describe when I say that my nerdish tendencies towards artificial intelligence, because
Right.
Siri is not intelligent. Siri is a voice, an automatic voice that's been hooked up to a dictionary, but she does not know language, it does not know language. Siri does not have a language. And the reason I distinguish in that is when you're studying AI, one of the things you get really into intelligence itself and defining it in a philosophical and literal sense, in a scientific sense. And one of the heaviest achievements or barriers is language. So, that's what separates us from every other animal. It's like, take dogs, for example. The average dog can possibly learn or has the potential for 20 words at max. See, they just don't have the intelligence for language. And that's why I say language is a distinct attribute and of intelligence. Now, I'm going to pull out and say that the definition I think of intelligence is kind of more, it implies an embedded intuition, in that, you can take information and kind of guide the future. It's like if you see a bull running at you, to know to step to the left or to the right, or to get out of the path of the oncoming bull. That is a sign of intelligence. But again, going further, language being that. And I'll share one last thing that's really into the weeds, and just with you, because you sound like we've got a lot of overlap. We could have 15 more podcasts. Where I see AI taking us is what I would like to call the augmented age. And I think and I want to break down. There have been 4 major historical eras defined by the way we work. We've had, and pay attention to, and I think the key.
Can I guess agricultural, industrial, information, and
There's 3.
You're going toward artificial intelligence, or you were starting to say augmented, but those.
Right, there's one more that predates those 3, but you named 3 of the 4. We've only had 4 ways. Again, historic eras defined by the way we work. The first one, and really the astute observation here, is the time that each lasted. And I'll give each age of the 4, and I'll give the time that they lasted. So we had the hunter-gatherer age, and that lasted several million years. And then we had the agricultural age, as you mentioned, which lasted several thousand years. And then we've had industrial age, which lasted a couple centuries. And now, as we are currently in, the information age, which has lasted a few decades. And now today, brings me to my point, we are on the cusp of what I believe our next great era as a species. And I want to call that and say, welcome to the augmented age. And in this new era, your natural human capabilities are going to be augmented by computational systems that help you think, robotic systems that help you make, and digital nervous systems that help you connect to a world far beyond your senses. One example I give is, and it has to do with the blockchain, is just take the augmented glasses with AR and like the Google glasses or that type technology, and incorporate it with the blockchain. You could go into a grocery store and look at a banana, and you could instantly know what farmer that was from, what truck picked it up, what time they picked it up. And I'm talking about each banana. Now, we don't have that kind of relationship with our products and services now, but that's the world we're going to, and that's what I mean when I say connected, digital nervous systems that connect. In summary, it's like I think we're going from a world that's going to move things from fabricated to farmed, constructed to grown, isolated to connected, extraction to aggregation, and obedience to autonomy. And it's thanks to these augmented capabilities, our world's going to change dramatically, in my opinion. We're going to have a world with more variety, more connectedness, more dynamism. I can't even say the word. It's in my accent. More complexity, more adaptability, and of course, and not to be too cliche, but more beauty. So when I say AI, I'm describing in that way. So I really love that your enthusiasm and where it's rooted, more importantly. And but before we get all philosophical there, I do want to. You did say, you're being a sci-fi fan, and I like to ask sci-fi fans, what do you think the greatest in the last decade sci-fi film or novel? Now, let me just keep it in the film. Sci-fi film has been, and I'm going to cheat and give you my answer up front and say I think it was Ex Machina.
Okay, I can see that. I think, can we expand beyond film and say screen shows too?
Yes.
Okay, then The Expanse for both film or both, show, film, and book.
That's astute. Yes.
The pair of authors that are Ernest Cline are phenomenal. There's actually two authors that write under the one name, and The Expanse is such a good sci-fi series that TNG, I think, will always hold a top spot just because it's hard to get rid of that nostalgic love for something, but it's up there in close proximity, because I would venture to say that it's better than Next Generation, except I can't kill my childhood darling that way.
Right.
But it's phenomenal. Like, so many of the things that they went through in writing that and filming it that are accurate, scientifically speaking. It's, why Interstellar is important as a sci-fi film. That's my love for it. And it's funny, there's still things that they throw out the window to take literary liberties with, right? Like hiding in asteroid fields or combat in asteroid fields. Like, come on, your asteroids are like hundreds of thousands of kilometers apart.
Correct.
You're not dogfighting in an asteroid field. But beyond that, like, so many things in it are phenomenally well done. It's so well written. The character development's amazing. Exploration of technology, and the greatest sci-fi, in my opinion, is really an exploration of humanity. To the point, I would say Neil Stephenson's The Scythe, that series, is up there just behind it for totally different reasons. You were talking about AI. I love the topic of AI and, things we're working on in that same vein. But the actual very pointed topic of AGI, artificial general intelligence, has always fascinated me. What does the world look like post-mortality? When you have an AI running everything, what does humanity then look like?
The transhumanist field really has got a lot of material to that lane.
Right, and I think all the great sci-fi writers and explorers throughout history have all had that same thing. Again, going back to Asimov or Philip K. Dick or literally any of them, they explore different aspects of humanity. You set up an interesting game that you tell a story in. What does it look like for those characters in this alternate environment? And that has always fascinated me. So,
what's the phrase I'm looking for? Cerebrally or intellectually drooling.
Yeah, it's all building in a space is also really interesting to those same points, And
AI and crypto, we both face the same upheaval battle in that 95% of the awareness now in both spaces are not what we're speaking to specifically.
No, although I will say I think the public is largely behind in their understanding of where we are.
The key in both, they're very curious, that's all we need.
Sure, but I think the larger public doesn't know that most major ports are almost entirely automated, or how much of the world is already automated and how much more automated it will become, which isn't, again, that's not smart AI, but it's a lot of really intelligent or capable algorithms.
So where do you see the future going?
So I think the future for us as a species and a society can go one of a couple directions. I don't think it's exactly binary, but I think, depending on what happens the next 10, 20-ish years, we'll either proceed into a new dark age, what I view as, being dystopian, more dystopian uh, than a lot of other things, or a golden age, more utopian. We could move toward eventually a post scarcity society. Um, and I think it's hard to talk about that topic. Earlier, I was mentioning, what's beautiful to one is horrific to another. I think an amazing future would be post scarcity, egalitarian, Star Trek esque world. Um, it's I think it depends heavily on what happens in the coming years for the climate, for the economy, for us, societally. Um, whether we start coming together as a people on a planet, or if we persist with individual power struggles and things like that. Technologically speaking, though, I think automation's inevitable. I think we're already well on the path there. Um, I think that's going to have a very interesting impact on, both production chains and labor forces, right? What happens, like Black Mirror explored this really interestingly with one of their episodes, but what happens to a world where you have very cheap production of near unlimited goods to consumers who can't buy them, right? What does that look like? Um, and I think we're realistically going there. The U.S., we have a labor force of 160 million people, 60 some odd percent of which are, I think it's like 64% of which are employed. That's that labor force participation rate, LFPR, which is about 100 million people. About 100 million, one third of the U.S. population is quote unquote employed or actively looking for work. What happens when we lose 50 or 70 million jobs for this labor force? What happens when you only have 1/6 of your population actually employed? That's not a sustainable system, in the current world. There's not enough money going around for people to buy things. So I think a lot of those things are interesting problems we're going to have to solve. And I think we have to look at our societal, governmental, economic models and how we adapt with the changes. Because I don't think automation is bad. I don't think growing efficiency is bad. I think not addressing those things in an intelligent manner, however, is bad. I don't think governments, societies, and economies not evolving is bad. So, what does the future look like? Flip a coin. I'm not certain yet. I hope for the best. I genuinely do. We're building for the best. Best case scenario, in my opinion, because I don't think you can actually plan for the worst. Nuclear apocalypse, if that happens, because that's not off the table. I don't think you can plan for those things. Not exactly.
That's a good point. What do you want to promote before we get to my wrap up? Is there anything you need or want from anyone listening?
We want to continue growing our community. Obviously, we need to continue fundraising, but before anyone ever buys anything from us or anyone else, be sure that you know what you're buying. You know what I mean? Be comfortable and confident in that decision. Within our community, we very mindfully have built it to encourage people asking questions. Like, we love questions in our community. We love answering them. Our, or we call them guardians, love answering questions. We, the core team, are constantly in there on our Discord answering questions. I go on YouTube videos and answer questions in the comments. I love answering questions because I think information is very important. So ask questions first. If you're interested in joining the community, please do. If after that you're interested in supporting us, you believe in what we're building, you believe in our team, then buy. So
Yeah, so I think the message to the user and to anyone listening is uh, stay curious and reach out to you with questions, and not just in a sales mode, but anything that they have, you will anything that they're curious about. If they maintain this curiosity, especially this budding ecosystem and all the potential within blockchain and crypto specifically, use you as a resource. See you as a resource.
yeah. I actually have 2 hours a week scheduled for our NFT holders where we just hang out and voice chat. Sometimes we play games. We BS about all manner of things. We had a phenomenal, very long conversation about life, the universe, and everything. Talked about religion with people of diverse backgrounds. It was really interesting. I think that idea of nurturing curiosity is one thing that we as a people in a society, especially in the United States or many other countries, not saying anyone does phenomenally well at it across their population, but we don't nurture curiosity enough, really. I think that,
I can't agree with you enough.
yeah, I think that is it's just something like, again, going back to the human experience, that is one of the most defining aspects, in my opinion, of the human experience is curiosity. It needs to be nurtured more, especially in children. Best
Well,
way
think
to
of how
teach.
the Department of Education, and I could write a thesis on this. They teach, the multiple choice, which is essentially regurgitation of information that you could use Google for. And they tell you, we don't need to memorize. I don't need to know what 2 plus 2 is. I just need to know how to access a calculator, because the calculator will be able to process faster. And those lying ass '90s teachers that told me I wouldn't have a calculator in the future, I'm like, it's like, that's a lie. It's like, I just need to know how to find the answer. I don't need to memorize. But my point being is that they're not teaching curiosity at all. It's
Right.
a B, C, or D, which is a memorization or regurgitation.
Right. And there's another thing that I think the education system does very poorly in that we don't teach collaboration. I think that's an interesting other aspect because the real world, if you don't have, like, look at every coder in the world. How often are they in Substack or somebody else's GitHub or Googling something? You know what I mean? Most everything in the world is a collaborative process. You're brought up and brought through these systems where you're very much, you have students around you and whatnot, but it's individual effort. Almost everything is individual effort. Um, Curiosity and collaboration are so important to the point that that's part of how we're building our team. Everybody on board the team right now, they're all lifelong learners, inquisitive, adaptable. They're collaborative. Because that's so important to me.
Tell me about your team.
So there's 4 co-founders. There's myself, our CFO, Pat Rooney. He graduated college the year I was born. He's been a CFO for 3 decades, more than 3 decades, for large tech firms, some multi-billion-dollar corporations, things like that, cybersecurity and defense mostly. Austin McCall is our CTO and sole developer who's got us to the point of launching our blockchain and swap and everything else. We are expanding the team. He's not just going to be, a gremlin chained in our basement forever. But everything has been made possible to a great deal with him. I would consider myself, by the way, a semi-technical co-founder. Been coding on and off since the days of BASIC. All the way up to present. Like, I just picked up Golang earlier this year, but I'm not our coder. He can code circles around me. I'm proficient enough to read it and Google things.
Right.
And then Lauren is our 4th co-founder, Lauren Williams. She's a geologist and data scientist by trade. She's our chief science officer. She will be heading up our research and development area and our not-for-profit wing, which I think having a very mindful approach to planning that from inception is important to what we're building and the scale at which I want to build. The rest of the team, we have just over 20 people now. We're onboarding another one in the next couple weeks, and then a developer right behind that, plus more advisors. But let's see, we have Mac, our CMO, McEwen Patterson. He is a phenomenal individual as well, ultra curious. We built rapport over time working together in a prior marketing company that he was with. And then I asked him if he wanted to come on board, with us as a project basis, because he's just a really interesting person, really intelligent, really curious. Again, is something I
good. You and I both
look
hit
forward
on.
to. Yep. And we got along really well. We have solid value and vision alignment. In his background, I saw that he wrote in Hollywood. He has a diverse background, a lot of it in the entertainment industry, music and film, which is, again, a sector we're focusing on. I don't want to go through every member of the team, but like at the upper levels, we also have John Moore, our VP of Growth and Operations, who's kind of a Swiss Army knife for the team. He went to college for neuroscience and chemistry, and then worked in medtech research company. Recently parted ways there, and I brought him on board our team. I'm really humbled with the team we're building. We have a few masters, some working on doctorates. It's a really, really impressive team. If anyone's interested, we still have more updates. I don't even think John's on our team page yet. But check out our team page or just hop in Discord and talk to us.
Will you share the links with me that I could put on this share with this post?
Yeah, sure. You can find everything just about through gaussgang.com, GAUSSGANG.com. But yeah, I'll definitely after this shoot over a number of different links.
Okay. I've got your website. I'll make sure to scrub it. So as a wrap up, if you were talking to your 18-year-old self, if you were out to dinner, say, and you're sitting with your own self, what would you talk about?
I have a question before I answer, and I know that's not generally the best way to go about game theory, but is this like, will younger me remember the whole thing?
It matters. I'm going to do the same thing. It matters in what way, as far as memory, or will they apply something? Will they apply it? Is that what you mean by remember? Like, are you asking?
Yeah. Would it
whatever you
change
say be
things
applied
or not? I can answer
Let's
both
say
ways.
yes and no. Answer both.
Okay.
Yes and no.
So if they do remember, it would be a shorter, I think, more difficult conversation. It would be incredibly vague. I would, tell them that they have a very interesting life ahead of them, that there's going to be a lot of beauty and a lot of tragedy. You're going to meet some amazing people and you're going to lose some amazing people. It's an experience. Just don't ever give up.
That's something the Marine Corps I do remember from my drill instructor was that don't ever, if you quit now, you always quit.
Yeah. And that's, not to get too dark here, but like the pandemic, I think a lot of people have lost people. A lot of people are very, very used to the idea of our own mortality. But in the Marine Corps,
take a different view on that. I think the West, when you study Eastern and Western philosophies and theologies and mythologies, I think the West is terrified of death to the point we don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's I would agree with that. It's an interesting thing that we don't do with a lot of things. We don't talk overtly.
We know
about
it's there, and yet we make sure, and overly so, to ignore it.
Right. Rather than talk about it and celebrate someone's passing or something. Like
Correct.
we're very
Like, we don't even like that phrase, like, it's celebrating a life.
right.
That's still getting new, it's kind of a new age way to look at a funeral. We're still like doom and gloom. They think about, like, doctors, they come in, their job is to keep you alive. They can't tell you you're dying because that defeats their job. And yet you could see it in their eyes that the patient knows they're dying. They see the gloom around the family, but no one talks. We're not allowed to, like, say it.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Different views on things. Like we have very puritanical and Christian, or not puritanical and conservative roots, rather, in this
Right,
country in
right.
general. And I think that influences a great many things, like our view on the body and sexuality and all manner of things.
On our
Um,
taboos of the West.
yeah, exactly. To the other side of that question, if they wouldn't remember the conversation, I would talk to my younger self about what I've done in my life, about the great and wonderful and terrible things that I've done or that have happened throughout, our life, uh, and what their input is. Tell them what I'm working on and what I'm building, and look for that excitement. I'm not saying it would change the course of current me, but I think it would be an interesting conversation to see how much I've changed and how much I've matured. 18 and 25-year-old me is young, very young.
Mhm, mhm.
um,
And
so many,
arguably, and this is not from where you stand now, immature.
yeah, and I was a precocious child and always have been inquisitive and learning, but my worldviews have certainly evolved over time. Um, you know, it'd be interesting, and I think younger me would approve.
What's on your podcast? What podcasts are you listening to, or what books are you reading?
Oh, so I for a while was going through business audiobooks again. What Matters, John Doerr's book, stuff like that. Right now, though, I'm actually listening to. I just finished the newest Neil Stevenson book in the Scythe series. It's called The Gleanings, or just called Gleanings. It's a series of short stories set in that universe, which was a really great way to put a bow on you know, that
Mhm.
experience. Um, and then right now, I'm listening to The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson, which is the latest book in the Mistborn trilogy. Um, I'm huge on fiction and I like business books. I'm just taking another little break from it. One of these days, I will break like my goal of 150 books in a year. That is forever. I got to 150 or 146 in 2017. Um, I got sick in December, and that's so close. It is so frustrating to set that as a goal at the beginning of the year, and then December comes, and you're sick for like an entire week because I was on
Oh
the road. I
man,
was traveling for 4 months, and I was just sick, visiting family. I was just in bed basically for an entire week leading up to Christmas and didn't read anything. I just slept. It was
wow,
terrible.
that
Terrible to miss the goal by that much. Like, I almost wanted to say, "Okay, I'm gonna read, like, 4 Dr. Seuss books and call it."
a little hack there.
Yep, couldn't do
Last
it, though.
question: what's on your playlist?
Um, so I actually, right now, I listen to synthwave radio, just whatever Pandora station I find, I look up synthwave radio and play, it's modern versions of '80s synth music, um, but it's all orchestral usually, not too much, lyrical. It's
Mhm.
just good background noise to work to. Um, that said, uh, I love all forms of music, and hilariously, for as many artists as I've met in my life, most things I couldn't tell you. Like if I hear a song 40 times, I might not still know who it is.
I'm the exact same way when it comes to music. Like,
Yeah.
I'm very genre agnostic.
Hmm.
However, I mean, when you come with the background of bluegrass, you can like everything else. I'm a little bit hesitant on jazz because I think great jazz is terrific and everything else is terrible, because jazz, I think, to me, is just everybody just throws in improv, kind of do what you want. That is jazz. It's like that's how it started. It's kind of just the mutt of music. However, great jazz is terrific, and yet that's about 1% of what jazz is. Other than that, all genres I'm open to.
Yeah. Yep. To the point that, classical violin's one of my favorite instruments. Like I've listened to Hilary Hahn a great deal, phenomenal young
Everything sounds
violinist.
good on classical instruments.
What's that?
I said everything sounds good on classical instruments. It's like you could
Played
play
by the
rap with
right
strings in an
people.
orchestra and it would kill it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, but I don't know. Have you ever heard Der Il Konig?
Not right offhand.
I'll send you a link. It's one of my favorite pieces. It's a really tragic story. The background of it, why, the story it's supposed to be telling in the piece. It's a very technically difficult piece to play. I've picked up a number of instruments myself over the years, enough to pick them up and say, yeah, I could play, Mary Had a Little Lamb on piano. I bought 2 violins and learned to play them, and then they've been in their cases ever since.
Yeah, I was a band geek growing up, first chair and trombone. And then my band director saw that I had a talent. So he taught me that, or instilled in me that you're not a musician till you can play or at least understand every instrument family. So I learned percussion to get a sec for rhythm. I learned saxophones. So I'd have an understanding of the woodwind. Piano is really my favorite because you can learn everything from piano. If I
Yep.
could go back, I would start there because like learning both bass and treble clef from the start.
Right. It's like learning basic arithmetic before you learn geometry or algebra.
There, exactly. The piano would be the very equivalent in the instrument world to, I
Yep.
believe, arithmetic.
Yep. Have you ever seen a harpeggi? Again,
I have not.
I'll look that instrument up. It's a fairly modern instrument, but it's a stringed MIDI player. If you watch someone play it, if you have piano background, you'll understand the keying of it. But the ability to add that sort of vibrato and tonality into playing a piano, just imagine that, right? Like imagine a stringed piano, which I guess a harp is almost, but it has a bit more than that. And being a MIDI, an electric instrument, you can pass it through a great number of things and pull out a lot more. So super interesting.
Oh man, that sounds fascinating.
Yep. Yeah, I've been
Gary,
following them since they first came out.
Well, Gary, we're gonna have to. I think we could talk. I think I'm gonna have to bring you on for some other topics if you don't mind. I'm saying how you do have such a depth and breadth, to your cerebral knowledge base.
Yeah,
But with that,
all the things. I love all the things. Actually, if you look at my LinkedIn, because that's where we first connected, if you go to my LinkedIn page, you'll see my education. It says Masters of Pantology from the University, or Masters in Pantology from the University of Autodidacticism, with the estimated completion date of 2142, which some people love and some people hate. It used to be on my resume too.
oh wow.
But it's,
I think that's a good thing because it's personalization. It's like it shows a little bit of your personality. The fact you say something that astute in what it is.
Yeah, it's a study of all human knowledge. For anyone who's listening, it's a study of all human knowledge from the University of Being Self-Taught, with an estimated completion date 120 years from now, but I've been using this for a decade.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It's really interesting how it divides people, because I've gotten really positive and negative responses out of it. It's really interesting.
Interesting. Off of a LinkedIn, if people take offense, like people get upset about that.
Oh yeah, we had our very first podcast, AMA type thing we did with Gauss. The community that we were doing it with, of course they're looking up all the co-founders and getting information and doing the Google, and I encourage them to do that.
They saw
and
that a tad too far sarcastic.
What's that?
I said they saw that as tad too far sarcastic.
No, they thought I was lying about my education.
Oh no, I see that as cerebral comedy.
Yeah, it's fully me being facetious.
Yeah, it's like that's Hello, that's what sarcasm is, by the way. It's like intelligent comedy, whereas you got slapstick, which is like your Will Ferrell's of the world. It's like, but then you have sarcasm, which is like comedy went to school and got educated.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
intelligent comedy.
But they were upset. I also had a college professor who was literally offended. Like, I don't think she was, I think she was very, very, very upset by it. A whole number of people. It's been interesting. And I love it and I'll leave it forever.
That's that's you can't please everyone, so I would take it with a
I
grain
don't
of
try
salt.
to.
That's something wow to get something so petty to get offended over is what someone else puts as educational in their LinkedIn and resume. It's like even if you don't like it, I wouldn't be that bothered by it. That's just
Right,
me.
but some people are, and that, especially, on a resume or my LinkedIn or whatever, it probably means we don't need to have a conversation.
There you go.
We're
Take
not
it as
gonna have
that.
a fruitful relationship. It's just I'm good with that being being a very simple screening method if that were the only one. But, yeah, I'd be down to talk more. This has been an excellent conversation. I enjoyed
Absolutely.
this.
Well, I appreciate you being on, and I will stop the recording.